When I look at our history, I realize that our history is not negotiable. It's not defined by slavery. It is a profound history, and we need to teach it in honesty. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Erudition Network, the Erudition Network Interactive Black History and Knowledge session. I'm happy to be here tonight with you. We are going to, I'm not going to really do a huge intro tonight because I really want to get to this for the hour that we have. I will say this is the Interactive, the Erudition Network Black History Interactive, where we talk about Black history and we talk about things that maybe you were not taught in school. Maybe they were kind of pushed over, avoided, revisioned. And so we try to uncover with facts these things that have been left out of our world history as it pertains to Black history. But tonight, we're going to return because last week we did a show talking about the forgotten good Black father or the forgotten good Black man. And it was something that I really thought that we should spend time talking about, focusing on. And tonight we're going to return. We're going to return because facts have to be shared. We were able to get through half of it, and I encourage you to go back, watch that episode, and garner information from it. We covered as much as we could within that hour and 10 minutes that we were on. But we can't be comfortable with a half-truth, right? You can't be comfortable with a half-truth. And last week, we started a conversation, and we need to go further with that. What we did, we cracked and talked about the myth of the missing Black father. In a recap, we talked about how public policy, how ideas were formed that aggressively tried to remove the Black father out of the narrative of being anything good, anything worthy. And so I want to go deeper because there are more things to cover. There are more facts to share. And we need this as we push against the idea of the thug prison media headline mentality. So I ask you to share this episode, invite people to watch, get on tonight. This is an interactive, so I want to hear from you. But we're going to do a little bit because as I reflected on last week, I realized we didn't go as global as I would have liked. We get down a path, questions are asked, and we didn't go. But we're going to go beyond rumor, beyond our, like I say, your barbershop, your local group of friends, beyond the U.S. border, beyond your neighborhoods. We're going to talk about the Caribbean father. We're going to talk about the Brazilian father. We're going to talk about the African father. We're going to talk about those people who are related to us and not just our cousins, because the truth of the slave trade meant that they went south before they came north. And how that myth has also affected our Latino brethren and other people of color. We're going to talk about 9/11 and how that affected it, how pop culture turned Black men into a sidekick, a thug, a clown. We're going to do all of that because the good Black man is not missing. He's not something that doesn't exist. He's out here right now working for his family. He's out there right now helping to braid his daughter's hair. He's out there right now mentoring, coaching, praying, sacrificing his time, crying. And he doesn't have to apologize for being what he has always been, a good father, a good leader, a good mentor. We're going to touch on a couple of things. I pulled a couple of scriptures, a couple of proverbs, and even things from our great Black writers over the centuries to suggest and to show the factuality of the existence of this Black father. The thumbnail that I chose and we created tonight with AI was "My father was there." Right? He's not forgotten. So, I'm Eddie Phillips, and this is the Erudition Network, and we're going to cover this history tonight because it is important and it needs to be done. And I didn't want to belabor it by introductions and waiting on people. If you are watching this, please share. If you come later and you start to get into the episode and we're already off the live, please feel free to leave your remarks and your comments. Let us know that you're here in the comments, that you're watching. Sean Anthony, I see you. Thank you for being here, my son. And join us tonight. Join us tonight as we go over this, as we get into this. And I want you to share this. Share this with your church group. Share this with your friends. Share. If you do nothing else, share. All right? As I said, Black fathers around the world are actively doing what they're supposed to do. But society, both in America and outside of America, often doesn't paint men of color in a positive light. We are seen as the abuser. We are seen as the thug. We are seen as these stereotypes that have persisted for a very long, long time. I pulled an African proverb that says, "One father is better than 100 teachers." And what that underscores is the fact that a father's impact of just being present, of being around, is so important to a child's life. And psychologists, they know this. Teachers, they know this. But oftentimes, it is manipulated when we see that fathers are made to feel non-existent or not present. Sometimes even when the father is in the lives of the children, the tropes and ideas of society convince women that they don't need him to be at the schools, at the medical appointments. And he even convinces himself. Because the myths and the historical trauma are so strong and are so much with us that we find it hard to maneuver around it. And we hear so-called experts, psychologists, and historians talk about the absent Black dad and highlight the fact that they don't provide love, responsibility, resilience, which is, we talked about last week, is a lie. But tonight, in part 2, we're going to expand our view. We're going to see how this has also affected other people within the diaspora, Black fathers who have experienced this in Latin America and the Caribbean, and how even coming over here to America, they are still affected by this, even though it is shown that they are closer in their families, and how they teach their children to survive, how they teach them business and everything else. And we're going to do that so we can defy the stereotypes. And we're going to anchor it in facts. Unlike what you may get on other parts of social media, we are about facts here. We are about the fact and the lived experience, the reality of what is happening. And you'll hear insights and things from me that will reflect on other studies. Because our goal here on Erudition also is to make you want to discuss this, to spark some kind of conversation between what's going on. And I know it doesn't appeal to everybody because a lot of people want to bend to what they think is sensational, right? As opposed to what is factual. But we're going to replace these tropes with facts. Let's start with Black fatherhood in the Caribbean and the diaspora. Black fatherhood in Africa was profoundly shaped by the history of Africa. People believed in the tribal times, in a culture and family. Sorry about that, it's my phone. And that expanded through slavery as people were brought over to the Americas to be slaves, be enslaved. They didn't lose their sense of connection immediately. And unfortunately, we are not taught that. I told you last week how the slavers purposefully removed families from each other to create a situation where people felt that they had no protection of their family. I spent great efforts last week talking about how the Black man was removed as the protector, as the leader of his community, and how this was important in it to push a slave narrative, to make the master of everything, of the Black family, of the Black community, of it all, right? And this wasn't done for any other reason but in order to be, what is the word? Deliberate in its business of the day and what it was going to do. They couldn't let Blacks legally marry father, mother, children, have children, do any of those things because they were owned. And then they separated them by masters, keeping them apart. And even as slavery went on into the colonial era, into the Americas, they forced Black fathers to be migrants, to never be able to have one family. In the Caribbean, this was called migratory labor. And it kept them away from home for a very long amount of time, or what they considered to be home. It gave rise to the stereotype, right, of the absent, irresponsible father, of the sperm donor. And we forget that this pattern was not a choice. It was cruelty. And once you're taught and conditioned into something over generations, these pressures became normalized, and it became a culture that was accepted throughout the diaspora. In the Caribbean, matriarchal households were the norm, And the visiting father, the Rolling Stone father, who may not necessarily reside in the house, but was known to be the father, he would come in every now and again. Marriage rates in some of these communities in the Caribbean remain low. And this was on purpose. This was on purpose. Today, it is estimated that almost 50% of African Caribbean children live in a single mother home. And that this situation is acceptable. And it is done on purpose. And it has historical roots. And when you see people push against it, they're being told, right, that this is something unnatural, not normal. But what we should realize that it shows the influence of slavery, poverty, racism, oppression that still exists throughout the world, not just here in America. And it doesn't mean that the Black father doesn't care about their father, or the Latino father doesn't care about, or that they're deadbeats. It is the fact that the systemic factors of their countries, of their societies, have pushed them away. And until we push back by making things to be non-normal in their respect, then we can make a change. Hello, Tina. Good to see you. It is crucial for us tonight to understand what tropes mean. It's understanding that these tropes are built off of slavery, and also understand the PTSD, post-slavery cultural syndrome that affects Black people throughout the world. That it makes us accept ghetto irregular behavior, foolery, absenteeism as a reality, because it's pushed on us all the time. And not being able to heal from the multi-generational trauma of slavery, how it affects us. And though you will have white scholars who will tell you, oh, that's not. Slavery happened so long ago. The same people who are benefiting from the wealth, privilege, and property and example of their forefathers who stole, took, raped, and are benefiting from that past, will tell you that your past doesn't matter. The takeaway is that Black fatherhood throughout the diaspora and America, the Caribbean, Latin America, even in some parts of Africa, it has always existed with a challenge since the time of slavery. It's been a challenge because they don't naturally want to not be there for their children. Not everyone. But as I told you last week, laws and enforcements have made it that they undermine the natural forces of what we would like to do. And we ignore the many Black fathers who try to push against this and remain committed and present in whatever ways that they can and try to raise their children despite laws and administration things and cultural norms and all of these things as they try to grow. Black men who want to be uncles and mentors and try to help young Black men when they see them going astray. Until I says it takes a village to raise a child, and we forget where that Afro-Caribbean culture saying, because that's where it comes from, has its roots. It's lived daily. If I cannot be there, then I would hope that my brother, my grandfather, or someone will help to guide. And it is only through these adaptive family arrangements that a lot of young Black men become older Black men, wise, good Black men. Because sometimes we have this pushback where we tell ourselves, and women in our community tell themselves, I don't need a man. And then the young men are affected. It affects their resiliency. It affects their understanding of what it means to be a man. A woman can birth and raise a man, but it's hard for her. She will never be able to understand what it means to be a man, just like that man won't ever understand what it means to be a woman. Those are physical dynamics and issues that will arise that are different, by nature different. So when we share that responsibility, when we say it takes a village to raise a child, and we live that, when we live that Afro-Caribbean cultural understanding, we are better. It is sad because as we are also going, we have to mention this part, that as we're going through this, there is now a racist bias, as it is in America too, as it has gone through our culture. In Brazil, Colombia, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, where Black fathers have a stereotype pushed on them by the darkness of their skin. And if you look at the news media that is filmed from those countries that I just mentioned, the darker the person is, those fathers who lean towards being more Black and less European, mainstream media rarely depicts them as good fathers, as men of character. The lighter skinned, the lighter the skin, the more Latino looking or Spanish looking, the more you are represented as being something that may be worth something. Not greatly expanded, but at least not looked at as something other. And so we have to look at that part too, and that pressure that is put on people within our own communities to be seen as something less than because of the color and the darkness of their skin. It is a mess. And when we talk about these myths, when we talk about them in truth, and how they have been exported and imported from European and American narratives, and then compounded into local issues. The pushing of the father out of the home, the economic disparities that exist in these communities, the poorness, the poverty. And everybody doesn't know how to come above the unstructured family condition. And so some give up because the poverty and marginalization is too much. It's not that they don't love their children. It's not that they don't love the woman that they were with. But the drama, the issues that face both parents often drive them to make very bad decisions. And those nuances of that get lost in our society as we focus on, well, the father's just not there. And the father is seen as neglectful, and the mother is seen as whorish, and on and on. And such stereotypes, these stereotypes make this large delta that we can't really get past because of the also denial of education, understanding, counseling, spirituality. All of these things are taken away from us and we fall into a trap. I believe it takes a mom support of a daddy and her children for a man to have the stereotype reflective or dad's children because she can dissuade or invite him. Well, she's dealing with her own stereotypes too. There's a two-part to this. There's a dual side to this, right? She's dealing with issues too. Because for the father not to be there, and then she has to make her way. If she's with another father or another man, now she has multiple children with multiple daddies. And it goes on and on. And what I truly believe is it starts, the reason I'm discussing this tonight is because it starts with a recognition. We have to recognize where we are. We have to initiate change. We got to celebrate those Black fathers across the diaspora who are doing things to fight against this condition. I told you last week that the CDC studies, Pew studies, all these studies show that the absent Black father is a myth. Because whether they live in a home with their children or whether they're apart from their children, they tend to be just as more involved in raising their children as fathers of other races. Let me ask you this question. Thought about this the other day. If you watch a movie, go back and watch some of the Westerns, the old Westerns, that the John Waynes, those Westerns where the fathers and brothers and sons will go on these long cattle rides. They would go away for months at a time, and they would leave the wife on the frontier with the children. But we saw those as good, homesteady, strong fathers, teaching their sons how to survive. One of the most famous movies, Old Yeller. The father, for the most part, of Old Yeller is not there. He's not there. It's the older boy looking after his mother and his younger brother. But we didn't see the father as neglectful. We didn't say that the father was absent. And those things have to be looked at. And so as we grow our recognition that Black men are involved and have always been involved, we have to understand how these findings support the history of who we are. We have to challenge the things that are being reported in the media. We have to challenge the ideas that have been said that Black fathers do not consider fatherhood to be sacred. We got to be in these churches telling young Black men that it's not just about going to have a baby. That's a life. That's a responsibility. Some churches now are teaching fatherhood curriculums, teaching people, young men, how to be good fathers, even if they're not in the home. Also, programs teaching young women how to be understanding mothers, even though the father of the child is not in the home. Teaching co-parenting skills, teaching healing, teaching historical lessons on what our ancestors had to go through when they were denied the ability to even claim their own children. Teaching the lessons that were taught by our ancestors that have been forgotten in present day. That will help us redefine what this idea is. As we reject these macho stereotypes, these thug stereotypes, these things about the father that we got from the slave owner of beating the black woman, of cheating on her, on running around with other women, of saying that this is only a woman's work. And then understanding that that is ascribed to the master. That is the post-traumatic slavery issue. When you let an unjust being become the father figure, you learn from that father figure. And you take it through multiple generations. I cannot tell you how many black men have told me that, well, you got to get out there and sow your oats. You got to get out there and sleep around. You got to get out there, be promiscuous. You got to get out there. No. Where did they get that from? And the ideas of it are so corrupted and so wrong that it is now maturated into what our young women, our daughters, who look for love with men by having children with them and forming attachments with them through a child that they really didn't want. If we start to portray the truth of what is going on and why we got to where we are, we can counteract this erasure that racism has put upon our cultures. We can stop the cultural tide of young women devaluing their bodies, of black men overdoing the idea of the physical dominant male to a point of death sometimes, fighting with their own brothers at gunpoint over a girl who probably wanted neither one of them. And so this program tonight, though many of you may be like, oh, I don't want to, right? Talk about it is important. Jeremy, they are not married though. Apparently marriage is not stopping men from having children. Statistically, single mom homes increase the crime rate. How do you blame modern day culture on slavery? So how do I blame modern day culture? Modern day culture benefits from the history of slavery. It continues to benefit. The slave mind, the idea, the symbiotic nature of slavery in itself caused black people to align themselves with bigoted whites. They fed them, clothed them, washed them. They spent lifetimes, generations, taking care of these families. And some of the wealth of those families was later fed into what, even in our current society, we forget this is not that long ago. And so what happened is when you break apart a symbiotic relationship like that, you don't allow people to now, after hundreds of years, know how or even accept how to be equal or survive on their own. One still eats off of the other. They find another way. And we've seen that. As I talked about last week in our Black codes and our Jim Crow laws and our approach to media and talking about Black people as welfare queens, as Black men as promiscuous, brutes, criminals. And If you want to look at the music, the media, the culture, and all of that, ask yourself who runs that. I'm old enough to remember that the 70s, 80s, and even into the 90s, there was positive Black music. But that music wasn't, it didn't make the money. It wasn't as salacious. It wasn't as character building, story building. And so we created these ideas based on what the societies that we had corrupted and what is known as these gangster rap scenarios, shooting people up, taking what you want, get rich or die trying, on and on and on and on. And yes, it is a part of where we are right now and why I'm talking about this tonight. And I know it ain't popular. I know it's not. But it is what it is. Let me ask you a question. How often, and be honest, later on you can put in the comments if you want, how often have you assumed a Black child has no father in their life, and that is the reason why they live in the community that they live in? How many times, actually, too, do you assume that every Black child you see doesn't have a father figure? If you were to be honest, how many times did you look at someone, a Black young man or woman, and say, oh, yeah, they didn't have a father in the house? And because that is the norm, that is the normal idea that has been put out here to us. And I've seen people everywhere on social media talking about it. When they're talking about the cruise ships, this is a lack of Black fathers and parenting. Even though statistically we know that that is a lie and that there are parents there. And that there are going to be people, regardless if the parent is there or not, that are going to act out. And then you start to look at the videos and you start to see, wait a minute, these were just people having fun, and somebody perpetuated the myth that, again, from these tropes, that they're violent, evil. But wait a minute. I'm old enough to know, and I've been around enough to know too. When you go to white clubs and they're in the mosh pit and people bouncing their bodies off of against each other, falling through chairs and busting through tables, throwing stuff at the bands throwing stuff back at them. But it's only the ghetto Black people. Let's talk about 9/11. I thought about this today, as far as people of color. After 9/11, after the September 2001 attacks, America spent a lot of money and resources. A lot of money and resources militarily. They went all in cities, in law enforcement, and every time they did it, they said it was a war on terror. And on the surface, we all saw it as a war to stop terrorism. But a lot of that militarization of local police forces, of just local areas, it meant a dramatic expansion of policing people of color. People of color. They weren't stopping Larry, right, who was going into his business. No, federal programs funneled military-grade weapons. They funded local police stations. They gave grants from 2003 till today that increased armored vehicles, SWAT teams, surveillance tools, violent training, exercise training, drills designed to attack urban and Black communities. Urban and Black communities, but let's really clear that up. Men of color became what was seen as a problem in these cities and in our culture. And as these new paradigms, these new things were turned against Black and brown neighborhoods, it almost came, like I told you last week, like the war on drugs to tough on crime. But as those paradigms pushed the effect, Americans were all into it because they were told this is a war on terror. Go back and look on how post 9/11 policing doubled down on racial profiling. How Black men were constantly being looked at as people of the suspects and people of interest. Consider how many Black children during that time were being killed. Consider Stop-and-Frisk in New York, where officers made about what is estimated to be 4 million stop-and-frisk stops. And almost 90% of them were Black or Latino or people of color. And many of those people were innocent. And while they were stopping and frisking those people, there were other crimes being committed by whites. 90% of the people who were even charged under stop and frisk or even put into the system because of stop and frisk were never charged of a crime. That studies have shown it consistently. But yet they were the ones that were targeted. Because see, the idea of the brute, lazy, shiftless, non-present Black or father of color has stayed with us. It's crazy because they were talking about bringing back stop and frisk when they found that the data showed that a Black person who was stopped was more than half as likely to have a weapon or anything on them than a white person. So by suspicion, you were just stopping people. It's what it is. One Black police officer said he sat down and he actually heard them say, "We are there to control the residents." Didn't matter if you, as a cop, were Black or white. Officers were being taught that everyday Black or people or civilians or people of color were potential enemies. And then they were given weapons that allowed them to treat them as enemies in a combat zone. I am a United States retired veteran. And you go to serve your country to defend the citizens of your country. Whether you agree with them politically, mentally, whatever, that's what you do. But the idea was that we got to control them. Because what they said was, well, I'm stopping these young Black men. I'm stopping these people because if I crack down on a minor disorder, right? If I stop him because his lights were out or whatever, stopping these people with these minor crimes will help to make sure that we prevent serious crimes. That's that whole broken window theory that a lot of policemen were taught post 9/11. But those zero tolerance broken window theories, they were only applied to black folks and people of color. And they were only applied when black men went into public spaces. That's why we came up with these terms of driving while black, walking while black, running while black, living while black. A black father walking with his son is more likely to be stopped and questioned for fitting a description that is so vague, it could be anyone. And then he has to be embarrassed, treated as a criminal, and tell his son to just go along, even though he and his son both know that this is wrong. And it goes again to justify what I'm telling you about the idea of removing the black father as the protector, the leader, and the mentor, and humbling him to understand that you don't control anything. And while we can look at it statistically, these are daily indignities. These are daily things that strain the black family, strain the black father's feeling that he could protect and raise his child effectively, in a way that very few white families will ever have to deal with. Worried about being harassed, jailed for minor offenses that didn't have anything, that they might not have even violated. Guns pulled on them with their children in the car. At least we forget Philando Castile being shot to death with a young girl in the back seat. The trope of the absent black father has been used so much that it is in politics and in culture that even when we bring it up, they say we're shifting the blame. They say we're saying something that we shouldn't say. You are removing choice and accountability from the individual. Nobody has to have in it. Listen, no one is removing choice or agency from anyone. But I will tell you from experience, if you go out, yes, protesting while black, as a black person, because this happened to me, and you're stopped in a car while I'm not violating anything, I've done no wrong. Recently, about 2 weeks ago, me and my sons were in a car. It was late in the evening. Police officer pulled us over. He pulled us over saying that I was driving erratically. It was a Friday night. I wasn't driving erratically. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do anything. And he pulled us over, and I pulled the car over, turned the light on, told my sons, make sure you know he can see everything that's going on. The cop came up to my window. He looked. I gave him my identification along with my military ID as a veteran. You know what he told me immediately? Oh, I thought that it looked like you were driving a little bit, your car was wavering a little bit. Whole story changed. Oh, he was personable, nice. But the reality is, I'd done absolutely nothing. He just saw a bunch of black men in a car driving around an affluent area at 12 in the morning. So don't talk to me about accountability. Don't talk to me about removing choice. People do these things because the society has told them that it is permissible. It is permissible. And I know, as I said, it's not popular to talk about these things. It's not popular. But I want you to understand that if we don't talk about them, if we don't understand that black people have the right, Black men have the right to be parents, to be mentors, to be caregivers? If we don't teach our young Black men that this is a normal thing to do, if we keep putting this implicit bias that the idea of a Black man taking care of anyone is an extraordinary sight. Oh, he's a good one, and don't realize that there are more than him. Then we will continue to perpetuate these types of stereotypical racist ideas that make a cop nervous when he sees a Black father driving his sons home from work late at night in an area he considers that they should not be in. And only after realizing that, oh, he's a military veteran, he probably can be in this area. These shouldn't be anomalies. This shouldn't be something where we have to justify our existence constantly. We have to be better. Because if we don't talk about the things I talked about this week and last week, it creeps into our self-image. We're already seeing it. If a young Black man grows up without seeing a positive example of Black fatherhood, and all he sees in media is pimps, thugs, criminals, harlots, he internalizes low expectations. He internalizes that as what he sees as the acceptable Black fatherhood. When we tell you that representation matters and that seeing is believing, then we have to understand we have to show them something different in our churches, in our families. We have to get them early to pull away from those culpable examples that will lead them down the wrong path. People who have been conditioned to believe that there is no such thing as love, care, parental value. We have to do better, and we have to be able to teach better. Let him understand the trope of the angry Black man, and that's a trope, and that you don't have to always be angry. You don't always have to challenge. What is illogical is to challenge something when you know that it will end possibly in your harm or death. Teaching them the better way of confronting and talking to a cop, even when that cop has nefarious intent. Holding each other accountable. The movie Black Panther was one of the most important things that stood out to me. And that second Black Panther movie was the challenge of T'Challa to his father. Said we left him. It's a violation. We, as a community, as a group, as fathers, as men, as mentors, have to reclaim the idea that we can be leaders, protectors, mentors. And we got to be vigilant about them tropes. And we got to tell people, hey, that's not real. And have the facts to show it. There's a reason why when Hurricane Katrina happened, people were shooting at Black men because the media said that they were breaking into homes, they were looting, and folks started shooting at the people who were coming to help them. We have to challenge the myth. It is the reason why I've done both of these shows. Right? And when we get moronic comments, right? Rather they be self-hatred, rather they be hatred of others. You showcase who you are and who you will never be. Because until you start accepting hate, I welcome anyone to look into it, to go pull up those Pew Research records, go pull up the CDC reports, go pull up the evidence that has been found, that has been buried, because even when they look at it, they don't want you to know that, because politically it's not expedient for them to tell that truth. When society convinces that people that Black fathers don't care, it can become blind on how you treat those Black fathers, how you treat their sons, how you treat their families. Well, they're getting what they deserve because obviously the father, he failed them. And so because he failed them, now they're failing everyone else. And then when you have policymakers and lawmakers who buy into that, laws are written telling us that Black lives don't matter. Ask yourself in honesty, how many of the things you see in movies and television and policing narratives influence your feeling of Black men when you see a Black man on the street? When you see him as a thug, as a criminal, as someone who's going to do you harm? When it makes you hyper vigilant because you can't feel comfortable. And then you'll drop some of us, not all of us, you'll drop your vigilance when you see a white man. And this does not serve you well because either could be a threat. It is not the suggestion that you should not have your head on a swivel. But who are you overly vigilant against? Who are you being told is the greatest villain? Because once you fall into that lie, right, you forget. You don't think about the ancient leadership. You don't think about the history behind good Black fathers. And if you were to just make a list of who you thought were good Black men, both today and yesterday, they could be people in your own family, as opposed to those who you consider to be evil, wrong, nefarious. I'm going to close this as I'm coming down to my hour. To all of you who joined us tonight, to all of those dads, those sons out there who will be future dads, God willing, take pride in knowing you are a Black father. Write your own chapter. Don't follow examples. Recall the proverb that I gave you when we open our episode. One father is better than 100 teachers. He creates an example. You are that important. Your influence, your presence is important. You affect the echo between you and your children. That echo will resound and even affect your grandchildren and grandchildren's grandchildren. This is the legacy. This is the legacy. It's the legacy. James Baldwin once said, if biology alone made a father, the world would blaze with the glory of just having that as a title. It's not about being able to create a child. It's about claiming the responsibility for that child after you've created it. Your day-to-day devotion, your day-to-day giving, that's what earns you the right to be called a father. Don't allow yourself to follow bad examples. Follow good examples. Look for people to give you stories of great examples. People who came from your same area, your same community, your same culture. Find a way to be uplifted. Find a way to be uplifted. Find a way to uplift a Black father figure in your community. Write a thank you note to to your dad, to your uncle, whoever you see as a father figure or mentor. Just tell them thank you for something that they may have done for you. The positive example that they have created for you. Maybe they countered a negative stereotype. Maybe they told you just because you can don't mean you should. Do that. I don't care how old you are. All of us have a mentor or father figure. Write that out. I'm going to do that tonight. Write that out to someone you care about and you see as a father figure. Even if they're a peer, even if there's somebody that's your age. Let's stop the narrative of the absentee, failed Black father, Black man. We are more than that. We have a worth. We teach and we grow. I want to thank all of you all for joining us in this exploration of Black manhood, Black fatherhood. I pray for some of you who may watch this later that it has been enlightening. I pray that it's challenged something in you. I want us to continue this conversation beyond this podcast. Drop your remarks in YouTube or Facebook. Share your thoughts, ask questions, tell your stories of how you see the situation. And let me close this by saying to all of those Black fathers who have played a part in my life, Black teachers and mentors, I salute you. I thank you. You were seen. You were needed in my life. And you will always be loved. And I thank you. My sons, thank you. Because you helped me to be who I am. To my granddad, to my stepfather, to my dad, to my best friend, to all of those, my brothers, both of marriage and by blood, I thank you. Well, until next time, until next week, when I probably will be able to, hopefully God willing, be here with you all. Remember to change the narrative of what's happening. Remember to share the Erudition Network with those who are out here. We really appreciate your support. I know that people love. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. I hope you get something when you do from this when you do watch it. Thank you, Tina, Jeremy, Bunyan, all of you all who joined. Thank you to everyone who will watch it later. I did not put my banner on. Yes, I did not. I'm aware. The Erudition Network. If you would like to support the Erudition Network, you can do so through our Cash App, the Erudition Network. Everything that you do helps us with our website, with our cameras, with our mics, and everything that we use to teach, help, and enlighten. And it will be greatly appreciated. Every little bit counts. If you cannot do that, do me this favor, and I ask this every week: share the episode. Share the episode. Share what you learn. Go back, pull old episodes of me and Tina that we've done and the boys have done. Share those episodes. We have hundreds of recordings that we have done over the last 3 years. And I'm going to tell you, you can gain so much from every one of them. From every one of them. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you. I want to get out of here. My wife says, you closed so long. Yeah, thank you, brother. Thank you for joining us. We don't always have to agree, but we got to at least talk to each other, ladies and gentlemen. That's why this is an interactive. All right, I'm going to get out of here. You all be blessed. Until next week, until I see you again, God keep you, God bless you, and God watch over your family and your loved ones. Until then, be blessed. Thank you.